So here I'll now pick that one Firebase project that I created before and connect it to this Flutter project here in the end. Then we can choose which platforms we want to support. And for that here, I'll disable macOS and web by selecting them with the keys and pressing space to select or unselect, so that I only add Android and iOS as target platforms. And with that, this Flutter Fire CLI will actually change a couple of configuration files in this Flutter project to enable Firebase, to add the Firebase SDK in the end, and to also make sure that these platforms are supported by our Firebase project. So it will not just change configuration files here in our Flutter project, but also adjust some settings in our Firebase project. So here I'll confirm that it performs these changes. And with all of that out of the way, it will now have made some adjustments to the iOS and Android folders, hence unlocking certain Firebase features there. And with that done, with that Flutter Fire configure command out of the way, we can now finally start adding some specific Firebase SDK features to our Flutter project. Because what we did thus far was the general initialization. Now we should also add the features that we want to use here. And for that, you can use the good old Flutter pub add command again, as we used it before in the course, to add third-party packages. For example, to add the Firebase _core package, which we must add to use certain Firebase features here. So that's one package that we should install into this Flutter project. And in addition to log our users in, we should also run Flutter pub add Firebase auth. That's another package provided by Firebase that's in the end part of the overall Firebase SDK that will add auth-specific functionality that we can use. Well, and with all of that, finally, we now added all the packages we need for now. We made sure that our project is also configured to support Firebase. Now we should just again run Flutter Fire configure to make sure that we have the latest configuration we need for the specific packages we installed. So I'll here go through that step again. And I'm doing that because essentially that is recommended here in the official documentation. And once that's done, we can set up Firebase in this project so that we can then use the features provided by the Firebase SDK in our code. And to set up everything, we should continue with the next step in the official documentation. We should add these two import statements here to our main.dart file in the lib folder. Hence, I'm going to do that here and add them here. And with that added, you should also copy this code here and add that in your main function, for which you also should convert this to an async function to, in the end, initialize Firebase. You also might notice that this Firebase options Dart file was added automatically. That was done by Flutter Fire configure. And it's that file which we're also importing here into main Dart. And therefore, it's the options set up there, which were set up automatically by Firebase, by this Flutter Fire CLI, and which you therefore shouldn't change unless you know what you're doing. But by importing that, by adding that and importing that, and by also running this code, finally, everything will be set up and this app will be ready to use Firebase. And again, this initial setup process, of course, does take some time, but with that, we're now ready to use Firebase features in this app. Now, to confirm that everything still works, I'll shut down my running app on the emulator and restart it from scratch. And now this assembly and this compilation and creation of this app package can indeed take some time. It will not take that long every time you start it, but if you just added Firebase, the initial compilation, the initial assembly can take a bit longer than normally, but ultimately it should finish, even if this process should take a couple of minutes, which is possible. And it should then run this app on the emulator again. And if you then should get stuck on this starting screen, you also should add another line of code in front of this initialize app code here. And you should call widgets Flutter binding, ensure initialized, and then restart this, and you should see this off screen again. And with that, we have the app as we had it before, but now with Firebase added to it. And of course, since this overall setup process took some time and we had to go through a couple of steps, even though those at least were well documented and therefore not too hard to replicate, but still, since we had to go through all these steps, it might not yet make a lot of sense to add Firebase, and sending and handling HTTP requests manually might still seem more attractive. But as you will see throughout the rest of this section, now that we did add Firebase, it will be super easy to tap into all these various Firebase services and features, and adding authentication, image upload, and later also push notifications will be much easier when using the Firebase SDK than if you have to do it all manually with the Firebase REST APIs.